It was a sunny afternoon when I first saw him. I was just coming home from work, tired, hoping to relax. But there, across the street, a moving truck was parked, and a man stood next to it, talking with the movers. He looked to be around my age, with a friendly smile and a confident way about him. My wife, Emily, was outside, watering the flowers, and as soon as she noticed him, she waved. "John, we have a new neighbor," she said, smiling as I walked up. I didn't think much of it at first. It was nice to have someone new in the neighborhood. Our street was quiet, and there weren't many people around our age. I gave a small wave back to the man, and he waved with a big smile. He walked over to us, his hand outstretched. "Hi, I'm Mark," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Just moved in." "Welcome, Mark. I'm John, and this is my wife, Emily," I replied politely. Emily beamed at him. "It's so nice to have someone new here. If you need anything, just let us know." "Thank you. That's very kind of you," Mark said, his eyes lingering on Emily a bit too long. I noticed it but shrugged it off. Maybe he was just being friendly. That evening, I didn't think much more about it. I was tired, so I relaxed on the couch, watching TV while Emily made dinner. But the next day, I noticed Mark and Emily talking in the garden. She was smiling and laughing, something I hadn't seen her do that often lately. I felt a small pang of jealousy but told myself I was being silly. Just neighbors being friendly, I thought. Nothing wrong with that. Over the next few days, though, I started seeing them together more and more. Whenever I looked out the window, there was Mark, standing by our fence, talking to Emily. They seemed to be getting along very well. Emily looked happy, laughing and chatting like they were old friends. One Saturday, as I was mowing the lawn, I saw Mark again. He came over, and before I knew it, he and Emily were deep in conversation, laughing and sharing stories. I tried to join, but every time I spoke, Mark seemed to steer the conversation back to Emily. "So, Emily, what do you like to do in your free time?" he asked, ignoring the fact that I was standing right there. Emily's face lit up. "I love gardening, reading, and cooking. I even bake sometimes." "Oh, that's amazing," Mark replied, smiling at her. "I love to cook too. Maybe one day we can cook something together." Something about the way he looked at her made me feel uneasy. I tried to remind myself that they were just being friendly, but a small part of me couldn't ignore the way his eyes stayed on her a little too long, or how he seemed to enjoy every moment she spoke. I forced myself to brush it off, not wanting to overthink things. But as the days went on, Mark seemed to be around all the time. Every time I looked out the window, there he was, chatting with Emily or helping her with something. I was starting to feel pushed aside, like an outsider in my own home. Emily didn't seem to notice, though. She seemed happier than I had seen her in a long time, laughing, smiling, and even dressing up a bit more when she went out to the garden. One evening, I decided to talk to Emily. As we were getting ready for bed, I gently brought it up. "Emily, don't you think Mark is around a lot?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked at me surprised. "Oh, he's just being friendly, John. He's new here and doesn't know anyone." "I know," I replied, feeling a bit frustrated. "But he seems to spend an awful lot of time with you." Emily just laughed, brushing it off. "Don't be silly, John. He's a nice guy. It's good to have a friend around." I nodded, not wanting to argue. But the uneasy feeling didn't go away. I wanted to believe her, but something about Mark's constant presence didn't sit right with me. The next morning, as I was leaving for work, I saw Mark again. He was standing by our fence, waiting. Emily was already outside, and they started talking as soon as she stepped out the door. I stood there, watching them for a moment, feeling a strange mix of anger and worry. Am I being too jealous? I thought, but deep down I wasn't sure. Something about Mark seemed off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The days continued like this. I would come home, and Mark would be there, chatting with Emily, laughing with her, almost like he was part of our lives. I felt like I was losing her. Slowly, one smile and laugh at a time. One evening, I decided to watch them from the window, just to see what they were talking about. I could see Emily smiling, her eyes bright, laughing at something Mark said. He leaned in closer, his eyes never leaving her face. I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of anger. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like something was slipping away, something I couldn't control. My own home, my own wife, felt like they were drifting from me, and I had no idea how to stop it. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I couldn't keep watching, feeling helpless, like I was losing her bit by bit. It was time to face my fears, even if I didn't want to. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought kept running through my mind. I needed to find out who Mark really was. Over the next few days, my worry only grew. Every time I looked outside, I saw Mark and Emily talking together. They were in the garden, by the fence, even in the driveway. They laughed together, shared stories, and seemed to be closer each day. It was like they had their own little world, and I was left outside of it. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that it was just friendly. But each time I saw them, my stomach twisted. One day after work, I walked into the house and noticed Emily was dressed a bit differently. She wore a nice dress, and her hair was styled. She looked beautiful, of course, but it surprised me because she didn't usually dress up when she was just at home. I looked at her, curious. "Going somewhere special?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She looked at me and smiled. "Oh no, I just felt like dressing up a little," she replied. "Mark might come over for a coffee, and I thought it would be nice to look good." The words hit me like a small punch to the gut. She was dressing up for Mark? For our neighbor? I tried to hide my reaction, nodding as if it didn't bother me. But inside, I felt a pang of jealousy that was growing stronger each day. Maybe I'm overreacting, I told myself. She's just being friendly. It doesn't mean anything. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Emily seemed happier around Mark, more alive, as if he brought out a side of her I hadn't seen in a long time. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit, and I felt something building up inside me. Jealousy, yes, but also fear. I was scared of losing her, even if I didn't say it out loud. The next day, as I left for work, I saw them again. Mark was leaning against the fence, talking to Emily, who was laughing at something he said. I watched them from the car, feeling like a stranger looking in on my own life. Emily glanced over and saw me watching. She waved, smiling, but I couldn't bring myself to wave back. I just nodded and drove away, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. At work, I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept going back to Mark and Emily, wondering what they were talking about, why they seemed so close. I felt like I was going crazy, imagining things that maybe weren't even real. But every time I saw them together, it felt more real, and it hurt more. That evening, I decided to talk to her again. After dinner, as we sat on the couch, I took a deep breath and spoke. "Emily, don't you think Mark is around too much?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She looked at me, a bit surprised. "John, he's just being friendly. He doesn't know many people here yet, and he likes talking to us." "To you, you mean?" I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Emily sighed, her smile fading. "John, please don't be jealous. Mark is just a friend. You're the one I'm married to. You're the one I love." Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. Instead, I felt frustrated, as if she didn't see what I saw. Mark wasn't just a friend, he was something more, or at least that's how it felt to me. But I didn't know how to make her understand without sounding paranoid or insecure. "I'm not jealous, Emily," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just think it's strange. He's always around, always talking to you. Don't you think that's a bit much?" She looked at me with a sad smile. "John, you work so much. Sometimes I get lonely, you know? It's nice to have someone to talk to during the day." Her words hit me hard. I hadn't thought about that, about how my long hours might make her feel. I felt a wave of guilt mixed with my jealousy, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I nodded, not wanting to argue anymore, but the worry stayed with me. Over the next few days, I kept watching them. Each time I came home, there was Mark, talking to Emily, making her laugh. And each time I felt a little angrier, a little more distant from her. She was slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to stop it. One evening, I couldn't hold back any longer. I decided to invite Mark over for dinner. Maybe if I got to know him better, I would understand his intentions, and maybe, just maybe, it would calm my fears. Emily seemed happy about the idea, and she started preparing a nice meal, looking more excited than I had seen her in a while. When Mark arrived, he brought a bottle of wine, smiling as if he didn't have a care in the world. He complimented Emily on her cooking, laughed at her jokes, and seemed so comfortable that it irritated me. I tried to join the conversation, but every time I spoke, he somehow turned the attention back to Emily. It was as if I wasn't even there. "So, Emily, what kind of books do you like to read?" he asked, leaning forward with that same intense look in his eyes. "Oh, I love mysteries and romance novels," she replied, smiling back at him. "That's amazing. I love mysteries too," he said, looking impressed. "Maybe you can recommend some good ones for me." Emily laughed, looking pleased, and I felt a knot in my stomach tighten. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to impress her, to get closer to her, and it made me feel helpless, angry, and sad all at once. After dinner, as I cleared the table, I felt a mix of emotions: jealousy, anger, and a strange kind of sadness that wouldn't go away. Emily was happy, laughing, smiling, and it felt like she was miles away from me, even though she was right there. When Mark finally left, I watched him walk out, feeling a strong urge to confront him, to ask him what he wanted. But I held back, knowing it would only make things worse. That night, as I lay in bed next to Emily, I couldn't sleep. My mind was full of questions, doubts, fears. I didn't know who Mark really was or what he wanted, but I knew one thing: I couldn't keep going like this, feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. I needed to find out more about Mark. I needed answers, and I knew that meant I would have to take things into my own hands. The next day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know more about Mark. Who was he? Why did he seem so interested in my wife? The questions circled in my mind, and each one made me feel more anxious. I knew it was time to find some answers, no matter how foolish it might make me look. That evening, after Emily went to bed, I sat down with my laptop and decided to look him up. I typed in Mark and his last name, hoping something would come up. First, nothing seemed strange. There were a few social media profiles, photos of him smiling, and pictures of him traveling. He looked like a regular guy, friendly, charming, and outgoing. But as I kept scrolling, I noticed something odd. There were pictures with two different women, both of them tagged as his ex-wives. The first thing that struck me was that both of these women were beautiful. Like Emily, they looked happy in the photos, smiling next to him, looking like they were in love. But in the later photos, both of them were gone, as if they had vanished from his life. It was strange, and I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of man had two marriages that ended so quietly? My curiosity grew, and I decided to dig deeper. I started looking through old posts and comments. Soon, I discovered something else. Both of his ex-wives had been married when they met him. In one of the comments, someone joked about Mark's charm and how he could steal any wife. My stomach twisted as I read those words. Could that be his plan? Could he be trying to do the same with Emily? The more I read, the more worried I became. Mark seemed like the kind of man who enjoyed winning people over, especially women who were already taken. I could see a pattern, one that felt too close to my own life. First, he would become a friend, charming and helpful, and then, little by little, he would make his way into their lives until he had taken something, or someone, that didn't belong to him. I closed my laptop, feeling a mix of fear and anger. I needed to talk to Emily, to warn her about Mark. But I also knew I couldn't come at her with accusations. She would think I was crazy, jealous, maybe even controlling. I had to be careful, calm, and smart about this. I couldn't risk pushing her away by acting out of anger or fear. The next evening, I watched them again from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. Mark was leaning over the fence, talking to Emily as she watered the flowers. She laughed at something he said, her face lighting up with a smile. My hands clenched into fists. It was the same scene I had seen so many times now, but this time I saw it differently. I saw him for what he was, a man who wanted to take what was mine, and he was doing it right in front of me. That night, I invited Emily to sit with me on the couch. I wanted to talk to her about Mark, but I didn't want to scare her. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. Emily, do you know much about Mark? I asked, looking at her closely. She looked at me surprised. Not really. I mean, he's told me a few things about his life, his job. Why do you ask? I hesitated, trying to find the right words. Did he ever mention being married before? She shook her head, looking curious now. No, he didn't. But I guess I didn't ask. Why? I felt a bit of relief. At least she didn't know about his past. I just found it interesting, I said, trying to sound casual. I looked him up online and found out he was married twice before. Emily looked a bit surprised. Oh, well, I guess it's not that strange. People get married, things don't work out. It happens. I wanted to tell her more, to tell her what I had found out about his past relationships. But I knew I had to be careful. Yes, it's just, both of his ex-wives were married to someone else when he met them. Emily laughed, but it sounded a bit nervous. John, you sound like you're investigating him. He's just a neighbor. Why are you looking him up? I felt a flash of frustration. She wasn't taking me seriously, but I tried to stay calm. Emily, he's around a lot. I just want to make sure you're safe. I know it sounds silly, but I don't want you to get too close to him. She sighed, shaking her head. John, you're being paranoid. He's just a friend. You're my husband. You have nothing to worry about. I nodded, not wanting to push her any further, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She didn't see what I saw. She didn't understand how dangerous he could be. The next day, I felt like I was walking on edge. I couldn't focus at work, my mind always drifting back to Emily and Mark. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I felt trapped, unable to act, unable to let go of my fear. When I came home, I saw them together again, and it felt like a knife turning in my chest. Every smile, every laugh felt like a small betrayal, even though I knew Emily didn't see it that way. That evening, as I sat alone, I made a decision. I needed to confront Mark directly. I needed to talk to him, to make it clear that I wasn't going to let him take my wife. I knew it was risky, that it might make things worse, but I couldn't just sit by and watch anymore. The next time I saw him, I would tell him exactly what I thought. I would make sure he knew that I wasn't going to let him get away with this. For now, I would keep my anger in check, but I was ready to act. Mark thought he was clever, that he could fool me, but I wasn't going to let him destroy my life. Not now, not ever. The next morning, I was ready to confront Mark. I felt nervous but determined. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say, but I knew I needed to talk to him. This had gone on long enough. I couldn't sit by and watch him charm my wife any longer. I waited until I saw him outside, leaning against his fence as usual, looking relaxed and smiling. He was just standing there, waiting, probably hoping Emily would come outside so they could talk. But this time it was me who walked over. Mark, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned, looking surprised but still smiling, as if he didn't have a care in the world. Hey John, how's it going? He replied, smiling that friendly smile I had come to hate. I took a deep breath, not wanting to lose my temper right away. We need to talk, I said firmly, looking him in the eye. He raised his eyebrows, still acting calm. Sure. What's on your mind? I felt my hands clench into fists, but I forced myself to keep calm. I know what you're trying to do, Mark. I see the way you act around my wife. His smile faded just a little, but he still looked relaxed. What do you mean? I'm just being friendly, John. I shook my head, my voice getting louder. Don't play games with me. I know you've done this before. You've done this to other men, haven't you? You come into their lives, act like a friend, but you're really trying to steal their wives. Mark chuckled, shaking his head. Wow, John, you really have it all figured out, don't you? I felt anger bubbling up inside me. Yes, I do. I know about your ex-wives. I know both of them were married when you met them. You think you're so clever, but I can see right through you. He laughed again, But this time it sounded different, darker. So you did your homework. Good for you. But what are you going to do about it? I took a step closer, feeling my heart pound in my chest. Stay away from my wife. Don't talk to her. Don't look at her. Don't even come near our house. I won't let you do this. Mark didn't seem intimidated at all. In fact, he looked amused, like he was enjoying this. John, you're acting like a jealous, paranoid husband. Do you really think Emily would fall for someone like me? Yes, I do, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You know how to charm people. You know how to make them feel special. That's what you do, isn't it? Mark shrugged, giving me a sly smile. Maybe. Or maybe Emily just enjoys my company because you're never around. Did you ever think of that? His words hit me like a slap. I felt anger and shame wash over me. Part of me knew he was right. I did work a lot, and maybe I hadn't been there for Emily as much as I should have. But that didn't give him the right to come into my life and try to take her away. I'm warning you, Mark. Stay away, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He just smiled, looking completely calm. Or what? What are you going to do, John? I stared at him, feeling helpless. I didn't know what I could do. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I couldn't just walk away and let him win. I took a deep breath, trying to think of what to say, but my mind was blank. I felt like I was losing control, like he had all the power. Mark leaned closer, his voice low. Face it, John. Emily likes me. She likes talking to me, spending time with me, and you can't change that. I felt my fists clench again, but I knew I couldn't hit him. That would only make things worse. Instead, I took a step back, trying to regain my composure. This isn't over, I said, my voice shaking with anger. He just smiled, watching me walk away. I could feel his eyes on me, mocking me, as if he knew he had one. As I walked back to my house, I felt a deep sense of defeat. I had tried to stand up to him, but he had turned it all around, making me feel like the jealous fool. I didn't know what to do next. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Emily was asleep beside me, looking peaceful, unaware of the storm inside me. I felt like I was losing her, little by little, and I didn't know how to stop it. I had confronted Mark, but he wasn't scared. He didn't even seem worried. In fact, he seemed more confident than ever. I thought about what he had said, about how Emily liked spending time with him. The words echoed in my mind, making me feel worse with each passing minute. I couldn't deny it. She did seem happier around him. She laughed more, smiled more, seemed more alive. And that hurt more than anything else. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained, as if all my energy had been taken away. I tried to act normal, but Emily could tell something was wrong. Are you okay? She asked, looking at me with concern. I forced a smile, trying to hide my worry. Yeah, I am Fina. Just tired, that's all. She looked at me for a moment, as if she didn't believe me, but she didn't push it. I was grateful for that because I didn't know how much more I could take. I felt like I was losing her, and I didn't know how to get her back. As I went to work, I kept thinking about what to do. I couldn't let Mark win, but I didn't know how to fight him. He was clever, charming, and confident, and he seemed to have everything I lacked. I felt trapped, like I was in a battle I couldn't win. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to give up. I couldn't just let him take my wife, my life, everything I cared about. I would find a way to fight back no matter what it took. By the end of the day, I had made up my mind. If Mark wanted to play games, I would play too. I would find out more about him, learn everything I could. There had to be something I could use against him, something that would make him leave us alone. As I drove home, I felt a new sense of determination. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I knew I had to try. Mark thought he could walk into my life and take what was mine, but he was wrong. I wasn't going to let him win. This wasn't over. Not yet. The next day, I decided to confront Mark again. This time, I wasn't going to let him get the last word. I had to do something, anything, to stop him from getting closer to Emily. I felt ready to face him, to make sure he knew I wasn't backing down. When I saw him outside, I didn't wait. I walked right over, my heart pounding but my mind clear. He noticed me coming and gave a small smile, like he had been expecting me. "John," he said calmly, as if nothing was wrong. "Nice to see you. I didn't waste any time. We need to talk, Mark. This has gone on long enough." He crossed his arms, still smiling. "Okay, let's talk. What's bothering you?" I looked him right in the eye. "I want you to stay away from my wife. I know your game. I know how you go after married women, and I won't let you do that here." Mark's smile didn't fade. In fact, he seemed amused. "John, you really think you can tell me what to do? Emily is a grown woman. She can talk to whoever she wants." My fists clenched, but I held back, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's my wife, Mark. You don't belong in her life or in ours. I don't know what you're after, but I'm not going to let you ruin my marriage." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "You're so tense, John. You think I'm the problem here? Maybe you should ask yourself why Emily is so happy around me. Maybe it's not about me at all." I felt my face heat up, anger boiling inside me. "Don't twist this around. I know what you're doing. You think you're clever, but I see right through you." He leaned in a little closer, his voice low and calm. "And what exactly do you think you see, John? A friend? A nice neighbor? Someone who just wants to be helpful?" My hands were shaking now, and I struggled to keep my anger under control. "I see someone who has no respect for boundaries. You can charm whoever you want, but not my wife. Do you understand?" He sighed, almost looking bored. "John, maybe you should look at yourself. You're working all the time, hardly ever home, and when you are, you're worried about things that aren't even real. Maybe Emily deserves someone who actually listens to her." His words hit me like a punch. I knew he was trying to get to me to make me doubt myself, but a small part of me wondered if he was right. I hadn't been around as much as I wanted. Maybe Emily did feel lonely, but I wasn't about to let him use that against me. "You don't know anything about my marriage?" I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "You're just a stranger, and I'm telling you now. Stay out of our lives." Mark gave a small laugh, shaking his head. "Fine, John. If that's what you want, I'll respect your wishes." He paused, giving me a look that felt cold and sharp. "But remember this. I didn't do anything to make Emily smile. She chose to be happy around me. Think about that." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling a strange mix of relief and anger. I had said what I wanted to say, but I couldn't shake his last words. He had tried to put doubt in my mind, to make me question everything. And, as much as I hated to admit it, he had succeeded. As I walked back inside, I felt a weight settle over me. I didn't want to believe anything he had said, but his words stuck with me. Did Emily really feel happier around him? Had I been too focused on work, too distracted to see what was happening in my own home? That night, I sat with Emily in the living room, trying to find the right moment to talk. She was reading, looking calm and content, and I wondered if I was making things worse by being so focused on Mark. Maybe I had been too quick to judge, too quick to see him as a threat. Finally, I took a deep breath and spoke. "Emily, I'm sorry if I've been distant. I know I work a lot, and maybe I haven't been here as much as I should." She looked up from her book, surprised. "John, where is this coming from?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. I want you to know that I care about you. I don't want you to feel lonely or unimportant." Emily's face softened, and she reached out, taking my hand. "John, I know you love me. Yes, you work a lot, but I understand. I don't feel unloved." Her words brought some comfort, but I still felt the weight of my worries. "It's just that you seem happy when you're with Mark. I don't want to be the reason you're not happy." Emily sighed, squeezing my hand. "Mark is just a friend, John. He's been a nice distraction, yes, but he's not you. You're my husband. You're the one I love." I felt a small relief wash over me, but I couldn't ignore the feeling of doubt that lingered. Maybe Mark had done more than I wanted to admit, or maybe I was letting my fears get the best of me. Either way, I knew I couldn't let this doubt control me. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about Mark's words, about the way he had looked at me, so calm and sure of himself. I realized that he wasn't going to just walk away. He would stay in the background, watching, waiting, hoping I would make a mistake. But I was done letting him play games with my mind. I was going to trust Emily, to believe in my marriage, and to stop giving him power over me. I had made mistakes, but I wasn't going to let those mistakes destroy everything I cared about. In the quiet of the night, I promised myself that I would be better, that I would put my marriage first. I didn't need to fight Mark to win this battle. I just needed to be the husband Emily deserved. For now, that was enough. The days that followed were quieter. I kept my distance from Mark, and, to my surprise, he seemed to stay away too. I didn't see him outside as much, and I didn't catch him leaning over the fence to talk to Emily. It felt strange, as if he had simply decided to vanish from our lives. For a while, I almost forgot about him. Instead, I tried to focus on Emily, on spending time together and talking more. We went out for dinner, took a walk in the park, and shared little moments that reminded me of how much I loved her. She seemed happy, relaxed, and it was nice to feel close to her again. One evening, as we sat together on the couch watching a movie, I finally felt like things were back to normal. Emily laughed at something on the screen, and I felt her lean her head on my shoulder. In that moment, all my fears and doubts seemed to fade. This was where I belonged, with her, and no one was going to take that away from me. Just as I was beginning to feel like we had moved past everything, Mark showed up again. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was in the garage fixing a few things. When I came out, there he was, standing by our front door, talking to Emily. I froze, watching them, feeling that familiar tension return. But this time, I didn't feel as angry or scared. Instead, I felt a strange calm. I walked over, keeping my expression neutral. Emily noticed me first, giving me a small smile. "Oh, John." Mark just stopped by to say hello. I nodded, looking at him directly. "Hello, Mark. Nice to see you again." Mark looked at me with that same confident smile. But this time, it didn't bother me. I felt strong, sure of myself, and I wasn't going to let him get to me. "I just wanted to drop by and see how you two were doing," he said, his voice casual. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has," I replied calmly. "We're doing just fine. Thank you." There was a slight pause, and I could see something change in Mark's eyes. He seemed to realize that his presence didn't affect me like it used to. He shifted slightly, glancing at Emily, but I didn't feel the same worry I once had. "Good to hear," he said finally, his smile fading just a little. Emily looked between us, sensing the tension, and gave a small laugh. "Well, it's nice to catch up, but we have some plans today, don't we, John?" I nodded, grateful for the excuse. "Yes, we do." Mark hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more, but then he simply nodded. "Well, I'll leave you two to it. Have a good day." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving us standing there together. I felt a weight lift as I watched him go, feeling like a chapter had finally closed. Emily slipped her hand into mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You know, John, I'm proud of you," she said softly. I looked at her, surprised. "Proud of me? For what?" She smiled, her eyes warm. "For trusting me. For not letting jealousy ruin what we have. I know it wasn't easy, but I appreciate it." Her words touched me deeply. I realized that, in all my worry about Mark, I had almost forgotten what really mattered: the trust between us. She had never given me a reason to doubt her, and I had almost let my own fears get in the way. "Thank you, Emily," I said, feeling a wave of relief. "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like I didn't trust you." She shook her head, smiling. "It's okay. We got through it, didn't we?" I nodded, pulling her close. "Yes, we did." That evening, as we sat together, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew that Mark was just a passing storm, something that had tested us but hadn't broken us. He had tried to shake my confidence, to make me question everything, but in the end, he had only made our bond stronger. For the first time, I felt like I could truly let go of my fears. I knew there would always be challenges, but now I understood that Emily and I could face them together. We had built something strong, something real, and I wasn't going to let anyone or anything tear it down. As I held her hand, I looked at her and knew that we had come out of this stronger, closer, and ready for whatever life brought our way.